And welcome back to Talk Business and Politics. Joining me now is Steve Brawner. And Steve, you have been a contributor to Talk Business and Politics who has been focusing almost solely on Medicaid, it seems, for the last how many months. And I was teasing you earlier, I think you wrote 4 articles this past week about this one topic. You're our expert in residence.
I have lost count.
I have lost count as well. Luckily, I have a few of them in my hand right now. So I want to start with the first article that you wrote. I believe it was on the 19th. And what was so interesting about this, when the Stevens Group report initially came out, the biggest red flag that people saw was fraud, and that was a lot of people were reporting on that. Now they're saying maybe it's not so much fraud as the need for automation. Explain that to me.
Well, when the Stevens Group contracted with LexisNexis to find, where are these people and are they really eligible for Medicaid, and it found 43,000 people in the private option and in Medicaid who don't have the best addresses in Arkansas. In fact, we have a number of them, thousands in California. And the original thought was, well, this is bad, and opponents of the private option seized upon this. I spoke to John Stephen a week and a half ago, and he said this is not necessarily fraud in all cases, although it could be in some.
In some, absolutely.
But it's just a process of people move around a lot. People go take care of their mother. They have an address there temporarily. It can be very confusing. What it definitely points to the need to do is for DHS to be able to keep up with where people live on a real-time basis. Right now they wait until the end of the year to determine if they're eligible and where they are. It needs to be able to be done on a constant basis. And
is that statutorial? I mean, is there a reason that they only check these numbers once a year?
That's what's required by the federal government. There's kind of unclear if they want to do it more often, and they should be able to, and they will probably do it now.
How does a system like this become automated? How do we have to contract that out? Would we have to bring it in? What kind of checks are we looking into?
Well, it's going to take a lot of money. Right now the system is spending $200 million to create an eligibility system, and it is more than double its original budget. It's been a huge boondoggle and a huge mess. So there'd have to be more of that to be able to. In fact, the Stevens Group wanted to create a system within the Department of Finance and Administration that would check on all Arkansans to see what we are eligible for across all state agencies. So that would be one solution.
And we are exploring many, I'm sure, at this point. And another article that you wrote this week talked about how a lot of those out-of-staters, which you were just referencing, are already off of the rolls right now. Tell me about that.
Well, DHS says that they've been, they have been checking. They say a lot of those people were already off the rolls by the time that LexisNexis was checking on them. They said that we sent the names in to them in June, and that since then a lot of them have been taken off, but we don't know how many. They're going to tell us in about a week how many that are off right now.
Tell me about managed care and why this might be something that our state looks at moving forward. I mean, it's a solution that a lot of people are talking about around the Capitol right now, and you wrote extensively about it this week as well.
Sure. Managed care is where a private company would come in and manage parts of the Medicaid program. The DHS director, John Selig, said maybe it's time to do this, especially for high-cost populations and also dental. And he said these would be some areas where a national private company maybe can do this better than we can. They have the staff, they have the expertise, they have some flexibility that we don't have to do some certain things. And so they thought that would be a better way to do it.
So taking it out of state hands and putting it in a private company might actually allow them to do more with less.
Yes, well, for one thing, like the state, if a person needs an air conditioner, and that will keep them out of the hospital, which is a lot more expensive, DHS can't do that. A private company could, and a private company has incentives to try to be profitable that state government doesn't have.
Tell me also about salaries, because this was kind of a shocker that came up in this as well. Director Selig maybe pushing for not money for himself, obviously, as he is stepping out, but managing the salaries of our DHS workers a little bit better.
It's coming up. The DHS Director Selig made $163,000 a year, and that's managing an $8 billion enterprise that affects really almost 1 million Arkansans. In the private sector, there was no way that kind of job would make $163,000. And for his deputies, it's also, for the people below him, also the salaries are way low. And he's saying we really can't go toe-to-toe with people in the private sector. We need higher salaries to be able to attract the kind of people that can do that, and a lot of legislators agree with that.
Really? And what were you hearing from the legislators? Because honestly, every time the fiscal session rolls around and people are asking for money, it's a lot of people balked at giving DHS more money. I mean, they felt like, well, they're squandering it now. I'm not going to, and that was a lot of talk. What I heard the last time it rolls around is the tune changing now. That's
a good point. It's a lot easier to talk about raising salaries and spending money when it's not time to actually do that.
Yeah.
It's a lot easier to talk about tax cuts during the session. So it would require kind of a change in mindset, but you wonder if maybe there's at least some more interest in it now.
Because you want to attract the right people to manage DHS in the meantime.
You want to attract them and you want to keep them. We spent $200 million because we don't know how to handle contracts. If we'd had different leadership, it would have been a lot cheaper.
Interesting. Well, thank you so much for your hard work this week. It's a weighty subject and you cover it so well and talk business and politics every week. We're going to join Steve, and John Burris is actually joining us in the round table right after this. Welcome back to Talk Business and Politics. Steve Brawner is back at the round table with me, and joining us is John Burris. He is also a contributor to Talk Business and Politics. Good morning, guys.
Good morning. See you.
It's been an interesting week nationally in politics. We had the former Secretary of State testifying on Capitol Hill. We had a lot going on as far as the presidential race. We got new poll numbers coming out. We had the current vice president saying that he was not going to jump in the race. So we have a lot to talk about. Let's start with where the Republicans are right now. Some new poll numbers show that Trump still has a strong lead in a lot of the early battleground states. Tell me what you think about that, John.
Yeah, I mean, he probably does. What some thought was the summer of Trump has turned into the fall of Trump, and it's going to stick for a little bit. I think as long as the field is as large as it is. It's hard to, he has a ceiling of about 30% and a floor of about 27%, but he never really climbs much outside of that range. Once the field whittles down, I think other supporters will congregate around someone that's not Trump, and we'll see a real nominee emerge. As fun as it's been to obsess with him, it seems like it's coming to an end soon.
So outside of his numbers, though, have you noticed any numbers? I'm talking generically, but maybe about Rubio or even Farina or Carson that have shifted more so than those 3-point swings that Trump has that have interested you?
The ones you've named, I think, were the ones that show the most movement. Ben Carson specifically. You have to think he's a little bit of a fad too. Rubio's probably the one with the most staying power through all those early caucuses and primaries. There's others too. Jeb Bush has money, and money matters when you're talking staying power. So I think Rubio, Bush, and some of those outsiders, they typically fade. We'll see if this is a different cycle, but I doubt that it is.
And Steve, any expectations on when we might start to see people dropping out of this race? Because he's right, the field is very heavy right now.
When they run out of money. And that time is approaching. At some point, donors give money for a reason. They believe in the candidate, but also because this is an investment. And at some point, it's going to become obvious that the money is going to dry up. And at that point, you'll start to see them kind of back out. Everyone that's at 3% right now, probably a lot of them aren't going to be around a lot longer. I thought one of the things that was interesting this week, Jeb Bush's campaign announced that it was laying off staff. And even though he's raised a lot of money, he's also spent a lot of money for 8% in the polls. And he is not catching fire at all, and it kind of needs to happen fairly soon for him.
Well, and it could happen. We have a debate coming up very soon. Any expectations of what we can see out of that, or anybody who really needs to step up and perform and maybe stop that bleeding that's coming from the campaign?
Yeah, if you don't, to Steve's point, I mean, I think if you don't have money and you don't have polls, what are you doing? You better do something in the debate because time's running out. I mean, the caucuses aren't that far away. The first one's in a matter of months. So certainly some of those, you'd say Bobby Jindal, Mike Huckabee's, those types that are polling somewhere 5% or below and low cash on hand, they've got to do something to move the needle, and debates are about the only chance they have. And frankly, it's a pretty low chance of success even then, but they would be the ones with the most at stake.
Steve, anyone do or die in these debates?
I think everybody that's at 3% or below, and that's a lot of them, better do something pretty quickly. It'll be interesting to see if the moderators give equal time as they have in the past, or if we start having the lower tier candidates pull a Jim Webb and complain about how little time they're getting. that will be an indication if even the media is beginning to think that this is beginning to narrow. Everybody that's at 3% has got to do something quickly.
Okay, interesting. Well, speaking of narrowing of the field, it was a question as to whether Joe Biden was going to jump in the Democratic race. And this week, a big announcement. He gave several reasons as to why he decided not to enter the race. What specifically stood out to you in his announcement? And really, I read a great article this week about the end of an era. I mean, he's been in politics for so long. What does a non-political Joe Biden look like going forward?
Well, I think I take him as word. I think that if he says that number one is, the grieving process is continuing, if he says that he's run out of time, I think he's 72. The calendar is now working so much against him. The shadow primary, where all the insiders have already picked their candidates, has already happened. It's really too late. And he's smart enough to know that it's too late, and I think that's why he didn't get in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think, he received a lot of encouragement, I would say mostly from a DC press type, a lot of hype. He's ran for president twice and lost. He's enjoyed the role that he's in, but probably made the right decision to not seek the presidency for a third time. It was fun to talk about. Politicians are always popular until they actually run for office, and then when they do, something changes, and I think he's probably wise to cash out when his stock is high.
Well, and really knowing the amount of effort and stress that goes into the campaign. I mean, he knows what to expect. You're right, he's already run twice before, so the wear and tear on the body mentally and physically of the campaign trail, I'm sure it's not something that you want to go into only half-heartedly.
Yeah. Hillary Clinton, I think, could have used the challenge because Bernie Sanders isn't one, but I think Democrats might be poorly served by her not having a real primary.
That's an interesting point. Do you believe that the lack of true competitor, as it were, kind of limits the amount of attention she's getting?
Not just that, definitely that, but also it's a kind of a well-known truth that the incumbent president loses the first debate. Mm-hmm. Romney pasted President Obama last time in the first debate because the challenger has been debating and practicing and getting in gear for an entire year, whereas the president doesn't really have that kind of practice. And I think that might work the same way. Hillary Clinton now is going to waltz right into the nomination with this pretend, competition with senators. Meanwhile, the Republicans are going to be a little more in fighting shape.
Iron sharpening iron
yeah.
a little bit at that end. All right, guys, thank you so much for joining me this morning. I really appreciate your insights, and I'm going to see what if your predictions reign true in the upcoming debate this week. And that's all the time we have for this morning. Thank you so much for watching Talk Business and Politics, and you can always stay up with the latest information on KATV.com and talkbusinessandpolitics.net. Have a great Sunday.